evening, Polk County voters. I'm Ellis Moose, Vice President of the Polk County Progressive Democratic Caucus. And because of our tight schedule from now on, I will refer to the caucus as the Polk Progressives. First, I would like to introduce our president of our caucus, Mr. Andrew Hartigan. There we go. The chairman of the committee that dedicated months to tonight's event, Mr. Jim Roach. Mr. Jose Garcia is over here, and myself are the other members of the committee. Jose is in the ready room, or he will be, with the candidates. So we wish to recognize the efforts of all of our partnering Polk Democratic clubs and caucuses who promoted this event and provided many of the questions that will be posed to the candidates this evening. These partners are listed in your program. We'd like to show our appreciation to the Polk County administration for the use of these chambers tonight and the very talented employees who have helped us prepare and put on this event. We are particularly honored that our forum is moderated by one of Florida's leading political pundits, the distinguished Dr. Susan MacManus, Professor Emerita of the University of South Florida in the Department of Government and International Affairs. Welcome and thank you, Dr. MacManus. And now up through a few brief ground rules for tonight's event. We are on a tight timeline. Each candidate will be allotted 1 minute to introduce themselves and tell us why they are running. The moderator will then ask a series of questions of the candidates in rotation. The same questions will be asked of multiple candidates, but not necessarily all of the candidates. The time for each answer is constrained to 1 minute. Each candidate will then be allotted 2 minutes period at the end of the session to elaborate on any previous comment or question and conclude with their final closing remarks. Our chair, Jim Roach, and his crew will monitor the time and will be very strict in upholding these limits. Candidates who go over their time limit on early questions may be dropped from the rotation in later questions. So they cannot cut off their opponent by speaking beyond their time limit. And now welcome our Democratic candidates for the state offices. Mr. Ricky Shirah, State House District 39. Dr. Shandale Terrell, State House District 40. Mrs. Barbara Cady, State House District 42. Ms. Joy Gibson, State Senate District 20. Kathy Lynn Lewis, also from District 20, could not be with us this evening. Bob Doyel, State Senate District 22. And Catherine Price, State Senate District 26. Rules for the audience. Brief, polite applause will be permitted. Cat calls, booing, hissing, and other behavior demonstrated by the current resident of the White House will not be tolerated. And with that, I will turn the floor over to our moderator, Dr. MacManus.
Thank you very much. And I applaud the audience for coming out on a nice evening like this and wanting to be informed about their government. And I particularly applaud each of you for offering yourself up for public service. As I teach my students, if we don't have choice, we don't have a democracy. And I applaud each of you for running. So let's get started, and I look forward to your answers here. The first set of questions will go to the House candidates, the second to the Senate. We'll alternate like that. It's kind of confusing, but I think you'll get the hang of it real fast here. All right, Mr. Shirah, 1 minute opening.
Well, first I want to thank each and every one of you for being out here tonight. I mean, it's a room full of Democrats, and I'm thinking, wow, look at this crowd. This is great. I have been here before and with the wrong party and was threatened to be thrown out. And so I'm not going to be thrown out tonight, I guarantee you. But I am proud to be a Democrat, and I'm proud to see each and every one of you here, and I know you care. I have run for this office before. I was defeated back in May, but it's a Republican stronghold, and I was kept waiting for someone to come out and run. but I'll be doggone if I'm going to let the Republicans just walk into Tallahassee unopposed. My name's Ricky Shirah, and I'm a proud Democrat, and if I'm elected, I will serve you well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shandale Terrell, born and raised in the community of District 40, attended all K through 12 schools in District 40, proud graduate of Lakeland Senior High School, went off to college, earned advanced degrees, came back home to serve the constituents in the community. Now I'm running to expand the business community, provide good living wage paying jobs, a safe place to live, and an educated workforce. Thank you. And I thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Barbara Cady, and I am the candidate for Florida House 42. And I was a military child and traveled all around the world, so I've learned to appreciate the multicultural, diverse type of community that we have here in Central Florida. I started school in Pensacola, Florida, when my dad was in the Navy, so I've always thought of Florida my home, but later on we went up north. I'm running because in District 42, we have an incredibly beautiful, diverse group of people. Many of our residents support the tourist industry and the hotel and theme parks, and they're struggling. So I believe every Floridian deserves an opportunity for economic stability, safe, high-quality public education, and affordable health care. And those are the three things that I have on my agenda to get started up in Tallahassee. So thanks for having me here, and thanks for all coming out. And next.
My name is Bob Doyel. I'm a Vietnam veteran, a retired circuit judge, a former law school professor, and a lawyer. And I'm a proud progressive Democrat because I grew up in the circumstances of the people that we care about as progressives. I grew up in a house that had no water, no gas, no electricity. I was the 10th child born into that house. It had one bedroom. I know what it's like not to have food to eat at night. I know what it's like to have patches on your knees. Not your knees, but your pants. And I know what it's like not to have medical care. And I'm running to fix some of those things in Florida. But mostly I know what it's like to have a good public education because I was able to overcome the extreme poverty I grew up in because of my public education. And I'm going to fight for it tooth and nail, contrary to the way the current occupant of this seat has been operating for the last many years. We are going to change this school system for the better. It's good now. We have good teachers. We have good people who we are employing, but the people in Tallahassee don't recognize that. So let's change Tallahassee.
Price.
Hello, my name is Catherine Price, and I'm running for Florida State Senate in District 26. I am educationally and professionally well prepared for this position. I started my career out with a science degree from Clemson University up in South Carolina. And then I went to the University of South Florida and received a master's degree in public health and finally a nursing degree from our local state college in Winter Haven, Polk State College. I've successfully worked in agriculture and forestry. I've been the business manager of a large community mental health center, Peace River Center, which many of you are familiar with. And I've chaired a countywide healthcare coalition in Polk County where we built a health improvement plan for this county. During this campaign, I'm focusing on 4 important issues: supporting economic development here in Central Florida, the heartland of Florida, ensuring that our children have safe, quality schools for all children, advocating for health care for all citizens here in Florida, and protecting Florida's environmental legacy. I look forward tonight, and I'm glad to see so many faces out here with all this rain outside.
Thank you. Now we're on schedule. Thank you all so much. Back to the question. First question, quickly, just, you've got a minute, so your top 3 priorities, boom, 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 and then tell us your number 1 priority, specifics about what you want to do about it. So, Mr. Shirah, you're up.
Well, 3 priorities is, I am so sick and tired of seeing what our legislators, Bob had mentioned it a while ago, has done. The money going to charter schools and not public schools. I have a special need grandson, and it just kills me to see what they've done to him, because he has to be in public schools. But I'm also tired of Tallahassee telling us how we have to do things here in Polk County. And it seems like the legislators that are up there now, they're not looking out for us. If I get to Tallahassee, I'm going to look out for the people of Polk County. Transportation, that's another thing. We have the honor of I-4 being the most deadliest road in America. Isn't that a shame? I mean, these things, if I get to Tallahassee and have the opportunity to introduce a bill, I want to make sure our lottery money that was deemed for education is a supplement, but the general fund, so you're telling me I got to move on, so I will. Okay, all right.
Next, Mr. Terrell, Dr. Terrell.
Yes, ma'am. Education will be my top priority in Tallahassee. I want y'all to imagine real quickly $100 million. Think about it, $100 million. This current legislation just passed $100 million into the School of Hope programs to build more charter schools instead of converting those funds back into the current schools that we have. We already have public schools, magnet schools, and schools of choice. We don't need no more schools as far as those schools concerned. I believe those funds need to be provided to our educators that are currently educating and teaching our students, the administrators, and better safe schools. If that $100 million could have been transitioned into the schools when the incident happened in Miami, I'm pretty sure we could have covered the basis of certified school resource officers, but we didn't, unfortunately. Vocational education, I'll provide more funding for vocational education because not every student is cut out to attend an institution of higher education, so I believe I would really focus on vocational education and funding that program there, and providing a great opportunity for the students to have a plan A and a plan B. Elderly services, I believe elderly services funding is very important. And those are my 3 priorities. Thank you.
Very nice. Ms. Cady.
Yes, like my 2 gentlemen to the right of me, I also have education as a number 1 priority. My daughter is a public school teacher in Broward County, and I hear a lot about the lack of funding and the lack of special education services that are there. My daughter was a special education student when she was very young, and she got early intervention services up in New York. And today she is a bilingual educator, and I think that just is a testament to how important it is that we have early intervention services for our students. So that's one thing, and a way to do that would be to redirect lottery funds into the education, not use it to reimburse other funds that have been diverted out, which is what I understand has been happening with the Republican governor. Hopefully we'll have a Democratic governor, which will make that easier. The other issue that is top priority for me in my district is the tightening up of the HOA statutes in Florida. We have corporate developers in Point Siena and in parts of Osceola County where I live that are really overreaching they're overreaching in that they are hanging on to the HOAs and making money off of the communities after they build the properties, which I have an HOA license, and I know quite a few people who are struggling because of that. And then the third thing, of course, is health care. Health care is very important to me. We need to accept those Medicaid funds. Thank you.
Thank you. We just want to get through a lot of questions,
Yes.
so we'll hear what you push it a little bit here. The next question goes to our Senate candidates, and this is from the Polk County Progressive Democratic Caucus. The question involves Medicaid. It is, do you prefer getting a state-level block grant or per capita funding for Medicaid, and why? Judge Doyel.
I prefer the per capita. because we will get an amount that we can manage. If we get, in this state, we have a long history of taking block grants or that sort of funding and diverting it. I don't want our money going into privatized Medicaid. I want us to get it and operate it ourselves, and I think we would be better served if we have a per capita amount, and including in that people who are not citizens at this time.
Ms. Price.
Okay. Well, first of all, you have to distinguish. Currently, we call Medicaid an entitlement program right now, because if you are eligible for the program, meaning you fall within the income guidelines of the program, no matter whether there's, let's just say there's 100,000 people in Florida that need it, or 1 million, we're going to allow that many people to access the system. The problem, there's been a lot of discussion in Washington about block grants, and there are actually two different types of block grants. There's a block grant that comes as just a set amount of money, or there's a block grant that comes as a per capita amount of money for the state of Florida. Either of the two block grant formulas, whether it's just a set amount or it's based on a per capita basis, would ultimately cut funding to Medicaid for the state of Florida. What we want to see is at the federal level for it to stay being a program that, because sometimes in Florida, say we have a hurricane and a lot of people are out of work, then you have more people that are accessing Medicaid. So you don't want a program that has a set number of people that can access the program. Right now, okay.
All right, thank you. The next question goes to the House candidates. The Sola-Vida Democrats want to know, what do you feel the minimum wage should be in Florida, Dr. Terrell?
I believe the minimum wage should be a living wage according to the area, in my opinion. I'll say between $10 to $12, being accurate. I believe that's a pretty good minimum wage to start off with, and then work your way up into that business. And then again, I don't want the minimum wage to go up to hurt small businesses. Only the main corporate businesses, those are the ones that need to increase the minimum wage. That's just my personal opinion.
Ms. Cady.
Yes, I support my state senator, Victor Torres, in his fight for 15. I believe that a $15 minimum wage is what we need in the state of Florida. We need it nationally. When people have more money, they spend more money, and our economy will do better.
Mr. Shirah.
You know, my grandson just graduated high school, and he started working at Publix, and now he's making $15 an hour. And so I am for, as Mr. Torres, is the $15 an hour. I worked at Publix many years ago, and 30 years ago I left there making $15 an hour.
Okay. Next question for our Senate candidates. This is from the Lakeland Democratic Club. This is a long one here, okay. People of the state of Florida voted to preserve our sensitive environment through purchase of endangered lands. But so far, the state legislature has not allocated the funds to fulfill that mandate. Will you promote funding for environmental issues, including purchase of endangered lands? Ms. Price.
Yes. Well, yesterday actually, I did a tour with my campaign team from the top of the Peace River system out here in Circle Bar B Ranch, which was actually in Bob's district, down to the Charlotte Harbor Estuary, which is at the bottom of my district. And my district, District 26, has 8 counties of these interior counties in there. We have some of the most important land and water resources in the state of Florida that are remaining not under concrete in these counties. And we need to protect land and water, and this money was set aside to do that, and we need to be using that money for what it was supposed to be used for, not for operating expenses for the state of Florida.
Judge Doyel.
Short answer is yes. I agree with Catherine. There is I have two different approaches to this. As a former law school professor and the holder of a doctorate in constitutional law, I see the Constitution as adopted by us folks as sacrosanct. And the legislature has ignored us in all of our constitutional amendments. They continue, we've passed them because they don't do what we want them to do, and then they ignore what we pass, and they've done that. This is a land acquisition fund. Acquisition is a word that's easy to understand. That means get. And we're supposed to be buying with the fund, that's money. We're supposed to be buying land for purposes of saving our environment. As far as funding other projects in the environmental sphere, I favor those too, but I'm out of time.
All right. You all are doing very well with the time. I applaud you. Next question for our House candidates. This is from Solavita again. All right. The question is, what underdeveloped economic areas have you identified in your district, and what would you do to take advantage of those opportunities? Ms. Cady.
Underdeveloped economic areas
Yes.
in the district for, in other words, for attracting businesses?
Or homes or whatever, anything that's underdeveloped.
Oh, okay, that type of thing. There's not much underdeveloped in my district. One of the issues that we have is the corporate builders have been forgiven their impact fees. That started, when I understand, once the economic downturn came. And I'm against that. I think that before a developer buys a piece of land and plans to develop it, they need to put their impact fees in place, and we need to understand how the roads are going to be developed to accommodate the carload. That's the way it was when I built my home in 2003, and then they stopped, and so that's a big problem. So I think we need to rein in some of the development, and development is good, but we also need to pay attention to quality of life, and right now the traffic is just unbearable for most of our residents. So,
Thank you. Mr. Shirah.
Yes, I would say there's not much as it hasn't been developed in North Lakeland and Auburndale and all the way up to Celebration. It's the corporate builders having this property in reserve because the housing market is rebounded and they're building left and right. But what really kills me is seeing them in the years past where they're going to build is have the agricultural exemption on this land that they're building now. But the impact fees should be, the infrastructure needs to be in place. I'm so sick and tired of seeing houses being built, then they build a school, then have 10 portables next to the new school that they just built and opened up. And the roads, it's crazy. Who in the world would want to drive from Lakeland to Orlando anymore? You're taking your life in your own hands. So I know you're not going to stop growth, but I wish we could control it just a little bit better.
Dr. Terrell.
Can you repeat the question, please?
The question was, what underdeveloped economic areas have you identified in your district, and what would you do to take advantage of these opportunities, meaning how would you address them?
Right. Well, Lakeland, I believe overall, which is all city and county such as Lakeland, which is my district, is very well developed. That's my personal opinion. I've seen growth throughout the years being born and raised here. The number of citizens in the city and county such as of Lakeland match the growth in Lakeland. So I believe the development part is pretty well good in the district. I don't have no further comments on that.
All right, we'll move now to the Senate. This is from the Polk County Progressive Democratic Caucus. The question, what practical measures do you propose to address gun violence? Judge Doyel.
The gun violence comes in a variety of ways, and we've been focusing a lot on the mass shootings, but there's more to it than that. there are lots of killings that occur one-on-one. My first priority, because of my background as a domestic violence judge, is to make sure that people charged or subject to a restraining order on domestic violence don't have guns. But we can also focus our attention on trying to get background checks, not trying, but actually passing legislation so that background checks are applicable in private sales and particularly at gun shows. I just see the red. So, all right. I'm against the AR-15 bump stocks and any kind of automatic enhancement to a semi-automatic firearm.
Thank you, Ms. Price.
Well, like Bob, I agree with Bob, what he said, all that he said, and I have a background in public health, and in 2011, Rick Scott administration said that you could either, a physician that discussed guns with a patient could be fined $10,000 or lose their medical license. The public health departments and the public health, the national public health system needs to be able to study gun violence and to be able to do interventions in communities, because a lot of times 70% of all gun violence is suicide. You know, that's one issue. And then there are issues of certain communities, even certain individuals in communities that are at higher risk of gun violence, death, or injury. So we need to be able to study it, and there are many, many different interventions besides just common sense gun control, which I do support, that would help to reduce gun violence in the United States and in Florida.
Thank you. Next question, House candidates. And this one was submitted by the Lakeland Democratic Club. Question: what do you see the state legislature's role to be in guaranteeing that all Florida students, public and private, receive a quality education, given that tax dollars are involved? Mr. Shirah.
You know, that's a good question. I wish I could answer that. You know, it hasn't been fair as far as the public schools that I talked about earlier. I mean, the money, our legislators that represent us in Tallahassee has made sure the private schools have been taken care of. That's the reason we need to make sure that guys like Mr. Shandale, Terrell, and Bob Doyel, we get them to Tallahassee to make sure that Polk County is taken care of in the public school. So I'm sure that when we get them elected in Tallahassee, we're going to be in good hands.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sorry, Dr. Terrell.
Repeat the question.
What do you see the state legislature's role to be in guaranteeing that all Florida students, public and private, receive a quality education, given that tax dollars are involved?
I believe a quality education is very important, public and private. Most importantly, it's very important that those funds are allocated to those schools. In addition to public schools, it seems like the public schools are being gutted to provide more funding to private schools, which I don't think is fair nor right with the current legislation we have in place. With me and the funding concern, through the past, educators have to pay into the Florida retirement system. We have to pay in so many dollars, we have to pay for this, and we have to pay for supplies and so forth. It's dysfunctional as far as the funding concern.
Thank you. Ms. Cady.
Yes, like I said before, our Republican legislature has diverted funds out of our public school system. I'll start with public schools. And we need to get those funds diverted back into, and also the Florida lottery funds. That was supposed to enhance our public education, and it's been used to fill in where other monies were taken out and used elsewhere. A private school education should be under the same requirements as far as quality of education, but as far as I'm concerned, a private school education is a parent's choice, And they need to understand that that is not something that the taxpayers should be paying into. I believe that's a private thing, is a parent's responsibility. Our public school system is the most important to me because that is the bedrock of our economy. If we have good public schools and we have students coming out with skills and job skills and education, then we're going to attract better businesses, and it's better for the economy all the way around. So I'm a big supporter of the public school and putting the money in there where it's needed.
Thank you. To the Senate. This is a question from the Polk County Progressive Democratic Caucus. It's multi-part, so I'll try to go slow with it. Can the voters of Florida count on you to shut out special interests and stand up for the will of the people by allowing the Department of Health professionals, rather than the Florida legislature, to create the rules for how medical marijuana use should be handled by insurance companies, employers, and law enforcement within the state, and how you will accomplish this? Took me longer to say it than you have to answer it, but you know.
I think you need to read that again.
So do I.
Basically, the bottom line is, what would you, would you allow the Department of Health to make the rules on the medical marijuana use and how it should be handled by insurance companies, employers, et cetera, or the legislature? And that does go to Judge Doyel.
Oh, it goes to me first. Okay.
You're lucky.
I'm looking to you, Bob, here.
Why don't you take this one first?
Well, I will say
Joking. but go ahead. Would you
Ladies'
repeat
choice.
the question now?
Bob and I are friends.
for it.
I thought he was stalling for time there, so I was going to
Would
give
you repeat the question?
Well, I will deal with this, Bob. Okay, let this woman deal with it. No, actually, I've done a lot of reading in the last few weeks about this issue, and it is a fairly complicated issue, what's going on with the Florida legislature with regard to this medical marijuana. And there are a lot of players that want a piece of the pie here. And I guess I was not aware that the health department was the point person on this. It seems like the Florida legislature has been the point person on trying to set these rules, and there's a lot of lobbyists that are running around trying to tell lawmakers how to do this. This is an issue that I personally need more study on before I could tell anyone what I would or would not do in regard. But I do believe that the people have spoken about medical marijuana and that we need to implement it in a way that's the most fair to the consumer of healthcare services in the state of Florida, not the one that serves big pharma or whoever is wanting to make money on this the best. The person that needs to be served the best by this are the people that need the medication or the service.
Thank you.
This is similar to the question on the environment, on Amendment 1. The people have spoken about medical marijuana, and the legislature has tried its best to ignore the people. As far as who ought to be writing the laws or the rules, I'm reluctant to abdicate my role, if I'm elected, as a legislator to someone who's not elected. So I think the answer to the question presumes that bureaucrats are better at writing the laws than the legislators. And as a retired circuit judge and a former law school professor, I think I can probably do a good job of writing a law. The problem is the will of the people is being ignored by the people up there writing the laws. They don't want to have medical marijuana, so they screw around with it.
Well, can I add something to that, Bob?
Please do.
Well, I think the problem goes to a lot of the things that we're talking about. The focus needs to be the needs of the people that need the service or, in this case, the medical marijuana, not people that are making money on it. So I agree with him that the primary responsibility lies with the legislature. Then you leave the details and the codification of the law or whatever to something like the health department. But the primary responsibility is the legislature.
All right, thank you. That was a tough one here. Next question to our House candidates. The LFBTA caucus wants to know, would you support and/or co-sponsor non-discrimination legislation that would make it illegal to fire someone or deny them housing because of their sexual orientation or gender identity or expression? Dr. Terrell, you're up first.
Would I co-sponsor any discrimination?
Would you support or co-sponsor non-discrimination legislation?
I want to answer this correctly. I would not sponsor any discrimination legislation that will hurt any constituent. I'm very diverse in my opinions, and I would support policies that's fair and equal to all.
Okay. Ms. Cady?
Absolutely. Our LGBTA community should be treated with the utmost respect and dignity, and no discrimination is acceptable in any of our state laws. So my answer is yes.
Mr. Shirah?
Absolutely. I would, I mean, it's about who you love. I mean, I have seen people discriminated against the company that I worked for many years ago, and it's got to stop. And you can it still happens to this day. So absolutely, I sure would.
Thank you. And I do want to apologize for saying LFBTA. I thought it was strange, but it was a typo, obviously. My apologies. I'm using a student's excuse right now, just kidding, but nonetheless. The next question goes to the Senate. This is a question from the Lakeland Democratic Club. This is a lot easier, I promise you. You'll do it, all right? Question, if proposed new higher homestead exemptions pass, how will you find other state funding to support schools and local infrastructure? And Mr. Doyel, you're first.
Well, with regard to the LGBTA, absolutely. I will co-sponsor, I will support, I will file legislation to achieve the goals. With regard to, what's the question?
Do I need to answer
I'm going
that?
to get out my ruler and
I had
now here it is. If proposed new higher homestead exemptions pass,
okay.
how will you find this other state funding to support schools and local infrastructure?
Well, first of all, the whole idea behind that homestead exemption is to reduce the authority of counties and cities and school boards, not necessarily the school boards, but the whole purpose is to transfer power to Tallahassee because the legislators have incapacitated our local governments. I'm very much against that. I am very much in favor of local control and home rule. So you're asking me to fix a problem that I don't think we ought to have. But if we have to do something to overcome the amount of money lost to our local governments because of the amendment, well then let's start with changing the use taxes and the sales taxes exemptions for the special interests. Let's wipe them out and use that money.
Okay. Ms. Price.
Okay. This is a huge issue, and this is particularly concerning to my district. My district is District 26. There are 8 counties in the district involved in the district that I'm running for. 5 of those counties, which are Hardy, Highlands, Okeechobee, Glades, and DeSoto, are what they call fiscally constrained counties. These counties already were put at a disadvantage by the previous reduction of or increase of homestead exemption, which actually causes a decrease in taxes. Statewide, we're talking about if that referendum passes, it's the, I forget the number at which, I want to say it's, oh, anyway, I just went blank on the exact number, but if that referendum passes, it will cause a loss of $634 million statewide. in the 8 counties that I'm involved with, that's almost $43 million. When you're looking at Polk County, it's about $11.6 million. I hate to say it, but it is a little amusing to see our Republican county commission having to struggle with a tax increase. And they're doing that partially because they're afraid of this loss of money that could come in November. I'm not sure exactly how the counties, these 5 fiscally constrained counties down in my district, are going to deal with that already. They're already having a hard time making their budgets. So that is a very good question, and I'm not sure how you will deal with that.
Thank you. Next question, House. This was submitted by the Democratic Women's Club of Lakeland. What is your position on a woman's right to choose and the future of Planned Parenthood and similar organizations? Ms. Cady.
Well, that's right up my alley. I have a degree in women's and gender studies, and I fully support abortion rights and privacy rights for all women. Planned Parenthood should remain fully funded, reimbursed in the way it has been from federal monies. Women should have no interference in the decisions they make with their reproductive systems. It should be between themselves, their doctor, and their faith.
Mr. Shirah.
I agree with Barbara. I don't want nobody, of course I'm not a woman, but no one's
Really?
going to tell me what I can do and can't do with my body. So I agree with her 100%.
Dr. Terrell.
I agree. Who am I to tell a woman what to do with their body, especially the government? I am pro youth, and I believe a woman should be able to do what she need to do as far as within her private life.
Okay, thank you. Next question to our Senate candidates from the Progressive Caucus. What is your position on current policy that private schools do not have to meet the same standards as public schools? And do you believe that tax dollars should be directed only to public schools? Ms. Price.
Well, first of all, 90% or more of all of our children are in public schools. I have a little bit of a problem because I come from Lake Wales, where we have a charter, not-for-profit charter school system. And I have seen improvement in our schools from that system, but we need to be clear, this is a not-for-profit charter school system. It's almost like a little school system in a school system. When we started these charter schools, it was my understanding that we started this having charter schools as a way, it was almost like where we could test new ideas for how to deal with education and to improve our schools. Now what we're seeing is more and more diversion of monies toward privately owned school systems, privately owned school programs, and I do not believe that public school dollars should be diverted in any way to for-profit system.
Thank you. Judge Doyel.
Would you repeat the question, please?
What is your position on current policy that private schools do not have to meet the same standards as public schools? And do you believe that the tax dollars should be directed only to public schools?
If private schools receive public money, then they should be subjected to the same standards as public schools. If they want to operate on their own with their own money, we'll let them go their own way. But if they are relying on taxpayer money for their schools in any way, they should comply with the same standards that the public schools have to meet. As far as the transfer of money, I think I've already spoken to that, but I wanted to repeat it and emphasize it, that we should have, first of all, we should have a moratorium on all new charter schools. We should not spend $100 million, as Dr. Terrell said, on scholarships to go to private schools. We shouldn't transfer $400 million of local money to build charter schools. I would end as soon as possible the transfer of public money to private enterprise.
Now, we are going to repeat some questions that's been asked to the other group so that you have a chance to answer the same kind of question. So we're going to ask this group here now the question submitted by Polk County Progressive Democratic Caucus, which is, what practical measures do you propose to address gun violence? Mr. Shirah.
You know, you would hope that common sense gun control, but that's not going to do it because, I mean, I'm a proud, I believe in the Second Amendment, but there's some people that have guns now that I know that shouldn't have them. As far as I think we should change the age from 21 to 18. There's a lot of things we should do. I'm, you know, I was really after what happened down south, my way of thinking about the AR-15 and any automatic assault weapon has changed. I'm a hunter. I'm an avid hunter. I used to belong to the NRA. I'm not so proud to say that anymore because, you know, they support everything that I'm against now. And I just think that we need some common sense gun rules like Bob had mentioned earlier, the gun shows where you can go and buy the guns. They need to, there needs to be something put in place to where you cannot buy a gun and walk out with it. If you can't fly, you shouldn't be able to buy. And I think they're just going to have to look at the people and say, you know, when's enough enough? I mean, it seems like every week there's another shooting somewhere. I mean, I don't know the answer. I wished I did because I would put a stop to it immediately. But it continues to happen and breaks my heart. I have 7 grandchildren. And do I worry about them when they go to school? Absolutely. Because, I mean, yeah, they're going to have armed guards at the school. But if I'm a shooter, who do you think the first person I'm going to go after? I mean, it's really, it's a sad world that we live in.
Dr. Terrell.
Yes, ma'am. Regarding gun violence, I'm a member of the City of Lakeland Gang Task Force, and I was appointed to that gang task force. It was 25 of us. We went out into the community, spoke to the constituents where the gang violence was occurring. So far, thank God that gang violence decreased. So I believe on the state level, there need to be task force in place wherever the violence is taking place, on the local level, on the local government level, and work in those communities hand in hand with the constituents that live there. And I believe that's a great way to decrease gang violence. Another way too, again, that $100 million could have did a world of good in providing safeguards throughout the state of Florida. We need to increase more mental health counseling services in addition to doing thorough background checks.
Very nice, thank you. Ms. Cady.
First of all, guns are too easy to get, and that's a problem here in this state. And I hope with our next election we'll have a better Secretary of Agriculture who's in charge of the background checks and can actually check on them. That would be a good start. We need to close up those loopholes, as said, in the gun shows, and we just need to really focus on the fact that guns are too easy to get. So whatever we need to do to make it a little bit more difficult is a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Now, Senate, you have a chance to answer a question that's been asked of the House candidates. From the Democratic Women's Club of Lakeland, question, what is your position on a woman's right to choose and the future of Planned Parenthood and similar organizations? Ms. Price.
Well, I support women's right to choose. I believe that women need to have access to good family planning services, and they need to have access to good contraception when they want to utilize contraception. And I believe that women should have a right to have that paid for by their health insurance plan. I know that's a federal issue, but it's important for women to have that option. Planned Parenthood should be protected and preserved, and
Thank you.
About it.
Thank you. Judge,
All right, I'm a man running as the women's candidate against a woman who has done everything she can to destroy the rights of women. I am very much, many of you, probably most of you know Anna Escamani of Planned Parenthood. I have marched with her twice and knocked on Kelly Stargell's door in protest of the legislation she has passed in some instances to interfere with a woman's right to control her own reproductive system. I think Planned Parenthood should be supported. I think that a woman has the right to make her own medical decisions herself. I disagree with some of the other answers. I think a woman is completely solo as far as her right to make a decision. She may need to consult with other people, but I believe it is the woman's right, absolutely.
we're now to the closing statements. You will each have 2 minutes. And we'll just start from left to right. Start with you, Mr. Shirah.
Well, I was born and raised here in Polk County, and I lived in District 39. And my opponent, I think she's 22 now. She is the queen of the NRA because in special interest in Tallahassee. Neil Cumby, which was the representative for District 39, came in and he sort of anointed her and said, "You're going to be the next representative for District 39. No political experience, period, but she has raised so much money from special interests. She's going to be a puppet for special interests. Whatever they tell her to do, well, that's what's going to happen. And if I get elected, I'm going to answer to the people of District 39 in Polk County. And trust me, it's something I'm very passionate about. And so if I can be elected, I will go to Tallahassee and represent you well. Ricky Shirah, think about me come November. I am not in the primary.
Dr. Terrell.
Yes, my name is Shandale Terrell, born and raised in District 40, attended all K through 12 Polk County schools, went off to college, earned advanced degrees, came back to serve the constituents in District 40, and I need y'all support to support the LGBTQ, women's rights, educational rights for public schools, and the constituents as a whole. You need a voice up there in Tallahassee, and I'm willing to come back with information to provide you in addition to having a community forum. I won't take the information and hide the information from you. Then you'll have to look for it or read it or research it in the publication or in the bill. I will provide you with the information. So I need your vote of support. Shandale Terrell for State House Rep District 40. Tell all your friends and family in Lakeland, Florida. Thank you.
Ms. Cady.
Yes, hi, I'm Barbara Cady, Democrat candidate for District 42. That's the Florida House. I am running because for the last 6 years, we have had an absentee representative as far as the people is concerned. He received an F from the rating of the group that's noted how much time the House people spent on their legislating for their people. I think we need a people's representative up in Tallahassee, and we need more of left-leaning, progressive voices. It has been too long rule for 20 years now, one-sided, lopsided. Democrats have had no say whatsoever, and that's not how democracy works. And that's why I stepped up to run, because I believe that quality of life is the most important thing. If you look at my donations, they come from individuals, they come from Democrats, and if you look at my opponents' donations, very few come from individuals. They all come from special interest groups, so I think that speaks for itself. Thank you very much. I need your support. Barbara Cady, District 42.
Judge Doyel.
Well, I'm going to follow a little different format. First of all, I'd like to invite all of you to become members of the Bob Squad to help in our campaign. And the way you can do that is to talk to Trinity and Gina. Sign up, volunteer for my campaign. We have a grassroots campaign, and we are really working it. Join us. We're going to win it in that way. Now, the second part of my format change is I want to answer some of the questions I wasn't asked because they were she and I agreed that they really got the easy questions. We had the tough questions.
You're running for the Senate, though.
So, well, but we have to vote on the same bills, and we all have to be able to read in order to decide what we're going to do on the bills. But first of all, minimum wage, $15 now, and have it progress more or higher into the future. Underdeveloped areas, depending on whether you're talking about economically underdeveloped or physically underdeveloped by adding houses. Well, the question that we were asked earlier about the land preservation, I mean, the whole purpose of that is to keep us from building on that land. So we've developed the land as much as we ought to. Let's redevelop some of the areas we have. And let's start with Juanita, talking about underdeveloped economically. Juanita, the northeast part of Lakeland, the Florence Villa area and Winter Haven. Let's get bus transportation to all these places. Let's help the people by providing them work and a way to get to work and a living wage. And I would start with a specific amount of $15.
Thank you. Ms. Price.
Well, Senate District 26 is huge. It encompasses 6,000 miles of some of the most important land, water, and agricultural land or resources in the state of Florida. My husband of 36 years, David Price, and I've lived for 31 years in Lake Wales. Did you know that Florida is for sale right now? These large donors are flooding our state right now with money, and they're paying for expensive advertisement campaigns that are designed to ensure that their candidates get elected. You know, the current Republican leadership in Tallahassee, they're spinning this very appealing tale to the people of Florida, telling them how they are save Florida from economic ruin by keeping our taxes low and keeping regulations, or by reducing regulation. But there's also another part of this story that they're not telling us. Florida has one of the lowest per capita spending on per pupil spending on education of any state in the United States. 20% of our community is still uninsured or underinsured, and middle class people are having a hard time paying for health care because of these high deductible insurance plans. Good scientists have been fired from our water management districts, and climate change is considered to be a bad word. Good policy is not determined by who can shout the loudest. If you elect me to go to Tallahassee, I'm going to go there prepared to ask hard questions on the floor of the Senate for you. For 8 years, I fought every day to make sure that my parents were taken care of well in a nursing home and an assisted living facility. If you elect me to be your senator, I will fight every day for you and the welfare of your family. The issues that unite us are more numerous than the ones that divide us. I need your help to win the campaign, and I have 2 staff members back there also. I don't call them the Bob Squad, but they are for my campaign.
Well, we'll put them to work.
I request your vote on November 6th, Catherine Price, for the future of our children, for the future of our grandchildren, for the future of Florida. Will y'all help me with this? Let's put the sun back in the Sunshine State.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, audience, I hope you enjoyed this legislative candidate forum. And we're going to have a break now. But if you want to volunteer for any of these campaigns, just come on up.
Okay.
And thank you so much, candidates.